we're live. Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. Sorry for the minor technical difficulties there. I'm Lily with San Antonio Water System, and today I am joined by Donovan Burton, who is our VP of Governmental Relations and Water Resources. And Donovan is here today to help us talk a little bit about our water management plan. So before we jump into that, I'm going to do a little housekeeping and remind everyone that we would really appreciate your shares. The point of us doing this as a Facebook Live is to be able to include as many people as possible and make this easy for people to consume on their own time. So please share, comment, ask questions, but important to please share and let others know that we're on, whether you're watching it live or whether you're watching it in the replay. We would really appreciate that. So also, we will be continuing to answer questions if we don't get to all the questions, or if some of the questions require a little bit more in-depth responses than what we can do on air. You know, by all means, leave those in the comments, and we will continue to watch and answer questions even post live stream. So, Donovan, thank you so much for being here, taking some time out of this busy schedule. I think one of the challenges that people sometimes face is that they hear us talking about things, but maybe don't really understand what it is we're talking about. So let's start super simple. What is the water management plan?
Yeah, well, thanks for hosting this, and really kudos to you, our communications department, because it is such an important discussion talk to have. Water is just the key to our lives. Everything we do, we settle here in San Antonio because of water. Everything we do is about water. So you guys are doing a great job getting out the word and fostering this community discussion, which is important. Most people don't know about it. Obviously, we've got thousands, really tens of thousands of miles of pipe under our feet, bringing water to our houses, taking it away, all those important things that people just don't see. And so I like it when we get to have this kind of opportunity to go back and forth and discuss with the public what our plans are for the future. So today we're talking about the water management plan, the 2017 water management plan. And the water management plan really is a draft, it's a vision. It's a vision for the future. Obviously, if you don't have a vision of where you're going, you'll get somewhere, but that may not be where
where you wanted to be.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's right. And so through the leadership of both our board, our city council, our CEO, we really want to foster this conversation to make sure that we have a vision of where our water management is going over the next 50 years. And we do that because of, we have a whole team of water resources, guys and girls that just are working constantly on a daily basis, managing our water supplies, really trying to decide which lever to pull every day. One of our staff people talks about it as, I'm a bartender. You want this water source, I'll turn it on this day. If you want it on that day, I'll turn on this water source. So it's really a daily water management activity that happens at SAWS. But this plan is really we need to make sure we go out and touch base with the community, with our elected and appointed leadership, and make sure that our vision is in step with the rest of the community. That really is what the water management plan is. We do it on a 5-year basis, sometimes a little sooner if something big happens. But yeah, so this is on a 5-year basis. The last one was 2012. Lots of things have happened and changed over the last 5 years. Lots of great things, and so that's what this water management plan is.
Do we have a question? I saw some movement over here, so I'm just checking in. No questions. Okay. So you touched on something that is, I guess, important. You know, we talked about, I'm a bartender, which water do you want? So maybe let's back up a little bit. What are our current water sources? Because maybe people aren't aware that we're not 100% Edwards dependent anymore.
Yeah, most people think we're just an Edwards Aquifer dependent community. That's what we have been. That's what we started out as a long time ago. But really over the last 10 to 15 years, we have done a fantastic job of diversifying off of the Edwards Aquifer. We now have 15 different water supplies from about 8 different sources, depending on how you measure it. But it is, we've done a fantastic job diversifying. And part of that is because the Edwards is not just ours. We don't own the Edwards. It's not just a San Antonio resource. It goes, all the way to Austin, and it feeds the springs. The farmers, the farming community out west use it. The New Braunfels, everyone that goes tubing uses the Edwards Aquifer in the rivers, and all the way down to Victoria and the coast. So the Edwards Aquifer is a shared resource. We had lawsuits and disputes over the past, really several decades And I think we finally mostly resolved all those in a way that we are sharing the aquifer in a good way, but we're also diversifying and developing other sources.
So that's great. Now, you did say that it's updated every 5 years, but we've also heard that this is a plan for 50 years.
Yeah.
So explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so we can't just plan. This isn't just something you can run to HEB and grab a certain amount of water and bring it off the shelf. Developing a new water supply is really decades in the making. Sometimes it can be 20, 30 years in the making. And so you have to start early. And you have to make sure that the community can plan based off of this water supply long term. So when the city decides they're going to approve a neighborhood, they have to be assured that that neighborhood is going to have water not only next year, not only 5 years from now, but way out into the future. So our job is to look way out into the future, project what our demands are going to be, what our water sources are going to be, what the weather is going to be. Our weathermen here have some difficulties predicting water over or rain over the next 7 days. We have to predict what rainfall is going to be 50 years from now. So.
Yeah, kind of difficult.
Yeah.
Now, we keep calling it a water management plan,
Yeah.
but I think for a lot of people, they're saying, well, this is just how you're going to supply water, so why not a water supply plan?
Yeah. This plan touches on exactly what you said. This is not a supply plan. We don't have our own HEB, our own shelf where we go out and buy water and put it on a shelf to where we can use it. We have to make sure that we're managing that water on a day-to-day, year-to-year basis. So it is focused on conservation. Very much, we can talk a little bit about conservation in a little bit. It talks about timing of supplies, when you bring those supplies in, which supplies are going out, like on a contracted basis and all that. So timing of supplies is important. And making sure you have it in the right places. Just because we have a lot of water in one place doesn't mean we can get it to where
it needs to be.
And so really this plan addresses how we're going to get those water supplies, how we're going to make sure that water gets to where it needs to be in the community, and how we're going to conserve and reuse that water. And so that's what management really means. And the bartender.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but I just wanted to clear it up. So I'm going to reintroduce. For anybody who maybe just joined us, I'm Lily with San Antonio Water System. I'm speaking with Donovan Burton, who is our VP of Water Resources and Government Relations. And we are talking water management plan. We are taking questions and comments. We'll do our best to address them, and maybe we have one. I'm not sure. Do we have a question?
Yes, we have a question that came in from a viewer. The question is, will my water taste different as you add other supplies?
That bartender question.
Yeah.
So the question is, I'm going to repeat it just to make sure it's on the microphone. Will the water taste different as we change and add additional water supplies?
No, the answer is no. And that's part of what goes into the things that nobody ever sees. And so if we bring in a water supply, it's usually going to be of a different chemistry than another water supply. So surface water, if you just drink it there, it tastes completely different than Edwards Aquifer. So we have to treat the water so that the water mixes well. It has the same chemistry, and so that you, the customer, don't taste the difference and that sort of thing.
Sure.
We try to make it as seamless as possible so that the customer never sees any of that.
In case in point, we have 8 different sources of water, and our water tastes the same regardless of where you live in the city.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, okay, again, we're just talking water management plan. We'll take your comments. Lily and Donovan, and we're going to continue with the conversation, so please share and let others know that we're here. So can you walk us through how SAWS actually plans for the future? I mean, I know how I planned for my college education and what I wanted to do as a career, long term, looking further out. What does that mean for SAWS when we're putting this plan together?
Yeah. Well, it's a great analogy of how you plan for college. I know a lot of people don't necessarily plan their finances for college. You go off to college and you hope you pay for it. We can't do that from a water supply perspective. You have to plan. I talked a little bit earlier about the timing of those supplies and making sure you get them here. We also can't just get a certain amount of water and assume we have that amount of water. A great example there is the Medina Lake. That's one of our water sources. We have water rights from the Medina Lake, and it's there right now. That lake is full right now. We have lots of water that's in that lake and able to be brought into our community. But we plan on a drought of record scenario. You can't plan, everyone has water during wet time.
Yeah.
You have to plan on the worst droughts of record. So we go and we use the 1950s drought of record. That's the official drought of record for planning purposes. But this plan is a little bit different in that we saw an even steeper drought within the 2011 to really the 15 time frame. And that drought of record was even steeper, higher intensity than the drought of record from the 50s. And so we've kind of hybridized the two. We've put them together so that we make sure that we have the most conservative planning, and you're planning for that deepest of drought. People talk about that we have different climate changes over the next 50, 60 years, and so you have to plan for those types of eventualities.
And so that leads me right into the next question, which was, climate change is on everyone's mind.
Sure.
It's certainly a hot topic. Is that something that is taken into account when we're putting the plan together?
We do address the climate variation within the plan, and so we are seeing more extreme droughts and higher frequencies of rainfall. We've just gone through a couple of years of very big rainfall, and so I think we put those into the plan. I mentioned that hybridized drought of record scenario, and we're really well accommodated for any changing conditions of climate anyway, because we're mostly a groundwater-based deal. Aquifer, our underground aquifer is not subject to evaporation like a lot of communities are on surface water. That goes to evaporation a lot of times. A lot of that water is committed also, our underground water. We have an aquifer storage and recovery program that we talk about a lot. And that's where we take excess Edwards water and we store it underground in a different area. Again, not subject to evaporation. We've got it there sitting for when we need it. And so being able to store excess water in large capacity like that sets us up to deal with any extreme changes in climate variation. So we are well positioned in should those eventualities occur.
Awesome.
Lily?
We might have another question.
I'll let you move along, but there's a comment from a viewer that if you could speak a little bit louder, or maybe move the mic a little closer, that would help.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
then we maybe needed a
Yep.
little louder. Okay, I think we're good. We'll just speak louder.
Okay.
We'll yell, yeah. Never a problem for me, obviously. So we were talking about, yes, climate change and how we plan for that. And I think, we've been talking about this water management plan for a while, and some of the questions and comments have come up in other places saying, well, how do you plan for those extreme circumstances and still make things affordable for us now?
That is a challenge, and we do have a plan, and that's really, again, part of that management word on supply. Again, if this were just a water supply plan, we'd go out and buy a bunch of water resources. Our bills would be higher, and as it stands, we have some of the lowest bills in the state. We have the lowest bills among major cities, and so we have been addressing that. I think the key to that is conservation. Conservation, we see conservation not as some green feel-good thing. We see it as a business model. Our CEO talks all the time about, I try to convince people to use less of our product. Any other company their CEOs would have a fit over that.
They'd be fired, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it works for us.
It works.
Yeah.
It works, and our conservation, really, we're the model around the United States on conservation. We've saved we're using about 50% of the water that we were, several decades ago, 40 decades back, and we've grown. Our population has grown almost double. So, huge strides in conservation. And really, where that drives home, back to your conversation about rates, is had we not done that, we would have needed 4 big projects, even more than 4 major projects, similar to Vista Ridge or something, to maintain that higher GPCD and that non-conservation in that scenario. Had we done that, obviously our rates would be much, much higher than anybody else. So conservation is the key to our business model in keeping those rates low.
So we started talking about conservation, which leads me to think about those 4 guiding principles that are part of our plan. Can you talk about those? What are those 4 principles?
Yeah. Conservation, number 1, obviously, we just talked a little bit about conservation. Diversification of our water supplies. I talked a little bit about the Edwards Aquifer and making sure we diversify some of those supplies. We look at demand by customer class as well. but we have a lot
And
of
what does
different.
customer class mean? Let's
So
explain
different,
that.
different types of customers. We have residential customers, we have commercial customers, we have industrial customers, different
Okay.
types of customers.
Which would have very different water needs, of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
But our four guiding principles really are conservation, technology, diversification, and regional partnerships.
So regional partnerships makes me think about the fact that we talk about this being the SAWS 2017,
Yeah.
but it's really not just our plan, right? Because we do affect the region. So can we discuss that?
Yes, absolutely. No longer are we just one community. Every community up and down the I-35 corridor and really throughout the state impacts others. What we do in San Antonio impacts our neighbors in New Braunfels. What people in Schertz do impacts San Antonio. Atascosa County, what we do down there. I mentioned the Edwards Aquifer goes all the way to Victoria, all the way down to the coast. So we can't think of water anymore as San Antonio needs to develop water for San Antonio. We are a regional community. I mentioned New Braunfels, all of these suburbs and exurbs. We're all developing throughout the region, the highest growth corridor in the nation, I-35. And so everyone looks to San Antonio, and we look to everyone. So we really have to share our water resources. You know, a great example of that is Schertz and Seguin. We had a deal with them. I guess it's been 5 or 6 years now. Our previous our current CEO worked with the previous mayors and council at Schertz and Seguin and developed a partnership with them so that we can develop water, use their pipeline instead of building another pipeline. And we saved $88 million for our customers by doing that. So sharing our regional resources is very important and very helpful.
We had another question from a viewer. The question is, how much can we store in ASR?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how much can we and how much currently,
Yeah.
maybe?
Yeah. So ASR, Aquifer Storage and Recovery, and that's where we have excess water supplies when we don't need in a wet year. We can pump up to our permitted amount. We can take that and store it underground in South Bexar County. A fantastic resource, and I'll keep going a little off topic, but the Edwards Aquifer, I talked about resolving disputes from the Edwards Aquifer. We really did that through the cornerstone of that agreement is really our Aquifer Storage and Recovery, ASR. And the key to that is we store that excess water, and during heavy drought times, we reduce pumping out of the Edwards and use that stored water. So that's that regional resource. We can get up to about 200,000 acre feet into our Aquifer Storage and Recovery. 200,000 acre feet, I apologize for the jargon, that's a water thing, but an acre foot is a little over 325,000 gallons, enough to feed about 3 to 4 homes. So we have almost an annual supply that we're able to put into the Aquifer Storage and Recovery. Right now, we've got about 135,000 acre feet, a little over a half of supply for a year.
Any other questions?
You can keep going. There's
Okay. We're finding the right time for the questions. So we did talk about regional, and we talked about impacting our neighbors. Of course, we talked about sources. So let's talk about the source that maybe lots of people have heard about, Vista Ridge.
Sure.
Can you tell me more about that particular source? Since it's one of our larger projects, correct?
Yeah, and so again, one of the great thing about this water management plan that's been so different than some of the other ones, a lot of times they're plans and they change and they don't work. We have spent the last several decades, we've been successful in developing some water supplies, but a major project we really haven't been successful on. We've started off, kicking off a lot of efforts to develop water supplies, going back to Canyon Lake in the 70s, going back to Applewhite, going back to Alcoa, several different efforts that SAWS has made to develop water supplies. And we put those into some plans and that sort of thing. But they just didn't materialize. For one reason or the other, all of them have their own flavor. This one is so much different. This water management plan is so much different because it's got supplies that are actually kicked off in the ground, and Vista Ridge is under construction. So you mentioned Vista Ridge. That's why it's so important and so good for this water management plan. It's a real project that's going to happen here over the next 3 years. So Vista Ridge is a water supply project out of Burleson County. Burleson and Milam County. There's a well field up there that's about 140 miles northeast of here. So a very long pipeline. Great news is it's going right through the high growth corridor of the I-35. And so we're going to bring that water down here to 50,000 acre feet. Again, that's a number of homes to do the math, 3 to 4 homes. But and it's developed in a public-private partnership. A lot of times these water supplies, I talked about some of the water supplies that didn't materialize. Those types of projects you can go and develop, spend a lot of money on them. And after they develop, if there's no water coming out of them for regulations or whatever, you're on the hook for paying that. The great thing about this project is it's done in conjunction with a private partner that they are actually spending their own money, they're actually building it, they're going to do everything and deliver us water. And all we're going to do is hold out our cup in Bear County and pay for any water that is delivered to us or made available.
And it's a set rate for a certain amount of time,
Fixed
right?
price for 30 years.
Okay, that's pretty awesome.
This private company, I'll tell you, they locked in, we were able to lock in the price before they even had the project designed. And so we locked in that price for 30 years, and at the end of the 30 years, a lot of that cost goes away. Kind of like your house. You still have to pay the bills, but after you pay off your house, you no longer have to pay that mortgage. You got to do maintenance and lights and all that, but it's a huge drop off in cost. Fixed price for 30 years, which is fantastic for us.
Great. I think we have another question.
Yes, we had a question come in from a viewer named Jim Smiley.
Mm-hmm.
He asked about SAW's policy on sustainable groundwater management and what our policy is on mitigation of groundwater resources.
Yeah, so perfect, good, great question, Mr. Smiley. This is a continuation of Vista Ridge. Again, this really applies to all of our projects. We have done mitigation in scenarios. Mitigation is really if we pull out water and it impacts your neighbors, you go and lower their pump, or there's something, you come up with some plan to make sure that nobody is negatively impacted. The great thing, again, this is primarily, I assume he's talking mostly about Vista Ridge. Vista Ridge is a project that we're doing in conjunction, making sure that we recognize local management of groundwater. So what we've told the folks in Burleson and Milam in that region is, we'll treat your aquifer the way we treat our aquifer. If ever there's a need to cut back, if people's wells are impacted, or if there is a lot of drawdown that wasn't expected, that groundwater district has the ability to cut back on some of the water supplies. And that's where we have made sure that we're mitigated and our customers aren't having to pay for that water not delivered. We're only having to pay for the water not delivered. But the key there is making sure that the local folks in Burleson and Milam County get to manage that aquifer and make sure that there aren't those sorts of negative impacts.
Okay. So we're talking a lot about aquifers, and before I started working at SAWS, I know perhaps I didn't have a clear understanding, and especially when we talked about ASR a little while ago. Personally, maybe now I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but I really kind of find it fascinating that the geology of the aquifers are so different, which is what allows some projects to work in some areas, right? Talk about why, I know the Edwards we call it a leaky aquifer. Even when if no one was drawing water out of it, it would still probably not be able to maintain the level simply because of its geology, the limestone. But then we take that water and we put it into another aquifer. It's a sand aquifer, is that right, the aquifer we're putting it into?
It's a sand aquifer.
So how does that function? Talk to us about why we can take that water and store it over there and then be able to draw it back up, because maybe it's not super clear for people how these bank deposits work.
Great question. Lots of different aquifers. By the way, did we get our microphone issue resolved? Is that something you need to do?
I haven't heard any of the comments.
We're
We're good
good.
so far.
Okay.
Hopefully people are doing well and hearing everything we're saying. So different aquifers. There are lots of different aquifers. Again, the simplistic, we talk about surface water, we talk about groundwater. Surface water are river, lakes, and streams. Groundwater is water underground, like the Edwards aquifer. Not every aquifer is the same. Some are karst aquifers, limestone aquifers, lots of rock. You'll go out to northern Bear County, you see lots of rock, and that water in the Edwards aquifer is just filtering throughout all of that rock, the karst features within the Edwards aquifer. Whereas if you go to the Carrizo aquifer, the other aquifer where we store water and where we're getting from Burleson County, it's a sandy aquifer, just like you said, and that water will stay there a lot easier. Whereas in the Edwards, that water is highly recharged, and And so anytime it rains, that's why we talk about the J17 levels on the news. That aquifer
J17
recharges
is a well.
Is a well.
Okay.
It's a well near Fort Sam, right on Fort Sam, and it's the level where we measure how the aquifer is doing. It's really the health of the aquifer, and it's a daily measurement that we have to look at to make sure that anytime it rains, water is getting into that aquifer. And as we start pumping it down, or as drought hits, that aquifer gets lower and lower. And that's where I talked about it's a regional resource, and we want to make sure that at certain levels of the J17, we're not impacting our neighbors. But so the Edwards aquifer is different. It highly recharges and it leaks at the springs. It comes out at the springs, whereas the Carrizo aquifer doesn't recharge as fast, but it also doesn't leak, and so the water stays there a whole lot more than the Edwards. And lots of different other types of aquifers. Every aquifer is different. They all have to be managed differently, and from a day-to-day basis, we have to make sure that they're looking.
And do we have another question?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a viewer, Kathy Carrion, and we also had a Coda Rayo Garza, and she asked how the water management plan takes into account ocean desalination and also other types of desalination. So,
desalination is great. It's a great resource. One of the things, and I know you've seen it, but we have just opened our brackish groundwater desalination plant in January when we formally opened it. Different types of desalination. Obviously, desalination just means you're taking out the salt. Primarily, people think of the ocean. When they think desalination, they think of the ocean, and that's absolutely a key to that. Ocean desalination is very, very salty, and so it actually costs a whole lot more than other types of desalination. We are actually sitting in a region with some of the highest productivity of groundwater that is salty in the state. The Water Development Board has said that the Lower Wilcox Aquifer is the best source of brackish groundwater for production.
And brackish means slightly salty,
yes,
right? Okay.
Slightly salty. That's exactly right. And so we actually have access to hundreds of millions of acre feet, again, trillions and trillions of gallons of salty, brackish groundwater that we can pull up and treat. Again, just take out the salt and make it taste like the other water sources. So we are sitting on a mecca of salty water that we're able to desalinate.
So less salty than ocean water, so less power intensive, cost intensive,
Absolutely.
and no need for a pipeline all the way down to the coast
That's right.
to bring that water up.
That's right.
So lots of benefits to being able to use the water right below us.
Yeah.
And that's at our H2O Center, right? And that's our 3 sources of water.
Yeah.
So that's kind of neat in and of itself that we have the ASR, we have the desal plant, and then we have local Carrizo, is that right?
Yeah, just the Carrizo Aquifer, local Carrizo we call it. It's one of the only places we've found really in the world, certainly in the nation, with 3 different major water sources on the same plant. Fantastic resource. Again, we offer tours of it. Please come down. For those of you on Facebook, please come down and see our desal plant. The other thing and how this plan addresses that, again, we have 13,000 acre feet of desalinated water that's online now, but we also have the ability to expand that plant, and that's really what I talk about timing of supplies. We've got this water management plan set so that water supplies from the brackish plant, we can bring those online really at any time. Vista Ridge really puts us in a position where we don't have a supply gap until the 2050s timeframe. But I also talked about if there's not enough water coming, what do we do? You know, I mentioned we don't have to pay for the water, but now we don't have the water, and so what do we do with that? And that's the beauty of the brackish desalination plant and the local Carrizo plant is that we can bring on phases 2 and 3 as needed to make up a new supply. And it is really the key to our long-term water supply from 2050 and beyond.
All right, so one more introduction. How are we doing with time? Where are we at right now?
I think we've got 20 more minutes, 15 minutes.
All right,
Yeah.
so just again, I'm Lily with San Antonio Water System. This is Donovan. We're talking water management plan. We've gone through, you'll be able to watch this in the replay if you're just catching us now. If you've got questions, please submit them in the comments section, and we will do our best to address all the questions that come through. So let me go back and take a look at the questions we've already discussed. Is there anything else? Oh, you know what we haven't said is, if you haven't seen our water management plan, where can you find this beautiful, he's got a draft here in front of him.
Right here. Very short.
Very short. We'll talk about that in a minute. So it is watercitysa.com, where you can find out about water management. It's a microsite of ours, and you can download the plan. If you don't have access to downloading and want to see a physical hard copy, we do have copies available here at our headquarters. So you're welcome to come into our offices and request to see a copy. It is a lot of information, right? I mean, it doesn't look like a lot, but we've had some feedback saying, wow, thanks for the tons of pages for me to read. And when I was reading it, I was thinking probably most of us could benefit from reading the executive summary.
Sure, yeah, there's executive summaries, I think 5 to 9 pages, something like that. Is a very short read. Really the whole thing is 60 pages, 63 I think is the exact, but you don't have to read the glossary, you don't have to read the table of contents. So, 50-something pages and divided into sections. It's really 15 short stories of 2 to 3 pages each. And so
that talks about each of those guiding principles.
Each of the guiding principles, our timing of supplies, the character of each supply. It talks a little bit about why this supply, what the issues are, and the problems or the benefits of a particular supply. So we go through some of that. We don't get too wonky. Maybe we do. Some people will probably think we get a little wonky, but we try to keep it at a high enough level.
Sure.
But people understand it. It's a very good read, and it's definitely our water future and where we're going.
And then, so we've got this plan, and we're taking input. We've been taking input. I know we've been going to meetings. We've done neighborhood association meetings with council, meetings all over the place.
Yeah.
Then what? What happens?
Yeah, and again, that's a credit to you guys at Custom Communications. Y'all just do an amazing job of getting it forward. I mentioned that earlier, but so lots of public meetings, and we really want public input. This is a draft. We actually took input even before, throughout the year. We've taken lots of different people's questions and input into the plan, and we've already filtered some of it in there. But from here, we still have, we want more comments. We want to try to get all the comments in by August 15th. And by doing that, we go to City Council in early August. We talk to the City Council and make sure that get some feedback from them. And then we'll take a final draft to our board in September. And our board will take action. They'll adopt the plan, and that will be the visionary plan going forward for 50 years. And we then, the staff at SAWS will take that and run with it. Again, we will continue to make sure that we're managing our water supply.
And it's our plan going forward for 50 years, but we revise it every 5 or so.
Revise it every 5
because
years.
Things change,
That's
right?
right.
Okay.
That's right.
And we do have another question over here.
Yeah, this one's a little bit more wonky than community input related, but Brendan Gibbons submitted a question about
Brendan, thanks.
stage 3 and 4 restrictions. He mentions that page 10 of the plan identifies stage 1 and 2 restrictions as being a very good tool. What is the outlook for the use of stage 3 and 4 restrictions?
Yeah, that's the beauty of this plan and developing the water resources the way that we have. So we have stage 3. Okay, let me go through the stages. You have stage 1, 2, and 3, and 4. And obviously when the Edwards Aquifer hits a certain level, then we have some cutbacks. And stages 3 and then 4 mean we can't water our lawns. We water once every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very difficult step for people to take, and so people are very upset about any time if we've ever. Luckily, we've never had to go into stage 3.
Thanks to ASR.
Thanks to our ASR and thanks to these wonderful supplies that we brought online.
Yeah.
Stage 4, by the way, is mostly a surcharge. It continues the once every 2 week watering, and stage 4 is a surcharge. So there are some restrictions in place. Those are on the books, and we have that ability to trigger. That's another one of those things that if something goes wrong in the plan, obviously plans will change over a 50-year period. If something is different, those stages are able to be triggered, but we really tried to avoid in planning to trigger stages 3 and 4 and forcing people into a scenario where we're watering once every 2 weeks. So that we had planned to have enough water. We do have the ability to do stages 1 and 2, and obviously stages 3 and 4 remain on the books. but we are planning to make sure that we don't have to go this extra.
And I guess that brings us back to conservation, because, you know, some of the other live broadcasts we've done are related to our conservation department and a lot of gardening. And people might be thinking, gardening? I mean, what does that have to do with water and, you know, the pipes?
Yeah.
But in reality, it's part of our conservation efforts to educate our community, to use the right type of plants, so that if we do have to water once a week or once every 2 weeks, your landscape will still be alive, our city will still look green and beautiful, because we're using plants that are appropriate for our area. That is very much part of what we do in the conservation. That's how we marry the two, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's what we like. You know, restrictions, they're a tool that we can use, and they're very effective when they are, but restrictions are really a temporary way to address a drought scenario. What we like, what we plan for is conservation. It's a little different than restrictions. Conservation is long-term permanent changes in behavior that will achieve permanent water savings. Stage restrictions are really a temporary benefit to get you through a drought. And so conservation is absolutely the key. Let me go back to one point, which is those types of deep restrictions really have an impact on our community and the perception that our community has external. So as companies are looking to move somewhere, if they see that San Antonio is constantly in, you know, they don't know all of a business moving from Kansas doesn't know all of the ins and outs of our water scenario, but they see in the paper and they see everywhere that we're going through these major drought restrictions. So steep drought issues can really impact the growth of our economy, and so that's one of the other reasons why. We talk about Military City USA. The city just recently rolled out their Military City USA. San Antonio is fantastic with our military bases, but and it's important for our nation's defense. It's important for our community, but it's also a tool for economic development. If those military bases went away, it would be an enormous economic benefit, not just on San Antonio, but in this region and for the state. Our military, the base commander, JBSA commander, came to our city council a couple of years ago, and the city council said, "Hey, what can we do to make sure you're not subject to base closures?" And the base commander said, "Really, the most important thing you can do for me is bring a water supply." Yeah. And we don't need people up in Washington D.C. thinking that there's not enough water supply to make our bases work. So when they bring new missions to San Antonio, it helps our economy. Or when they say, "Hey, you don't have enough water, let's take those military bases out," that negatively impacts. So we struck a deal with the military bases. That's all taken care of now, and so moving forward.
Again, why it's management and not supply, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Do we have another question, Ed?
Yes, we do. This question came in from the viewer Kate Cooper, and she's wondering what the major takeaway messages are from the water management plan.
Yeah. The major takeaways from the water management plan are that we have developed enough water supplies to get us through 2070. I think that's the takeaway message out of it. But the takeaway also is that we continue conservation. We need supplies, but we also need conservation. Again, we're not just doing conservation because it's a feel-good thing. We plan for conservation, and if we don't achieve that conservation, then we've got to do something else on the water supply side. So conservation, we plan for a 30% reduction in conservation going forward. So I think that's another very key message.
And let me clarify, 30% reduction of water use, not of our conservation efforts.
Yes, yes.
I don't want people, on the contrary, we're increasing our conservation efforts
yes.
because we're trying to reduce total water use by our community.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And back on the conservation message, we talked about the outdoor and the landscaping. I often hear people say, well, wait a minute, what about all your indoor stuff? And I think if they're not familiar with the history of our conservation efforts, to your point earlier, we are leaders. They're doing a great job. They're award-winning, sort of setting the standard. So why don't we remind the viewers, what have we already done in conservation, and why are we now looking at external outdoor issues as the main way to reduce?
Yeah, we are seen all over the nation as really the nation's leader of conservation. Just look to that stat I told you earlier, almost a 50% reduction in water use, per capita water use over the last 4 years. We know conservation, we do conservation. A lot of that was indoor conservation, changing out toilets, fixtures, those sorts of things. Just use of indoor fixtures. We're done.
Yeah, we've done it, and
We've done
we
it.
have covered that.
Yeah,
Now, the
there-
city also, I guess, mandates that as new buildings are constructed, they use water conserving fixtures and things like that,
Yeah,
right?
actually the state, even manufactured things that are sold are now in a high efficiency mode. And so indoor has a whole lot of stuff we've done. We do still have more to do on indoor, and that's really leaky pipes, helping customers to make sure that when they have leaky toilets and leaky pipes, those sorts of things. So there's still a lot more indoor we can do. But for anybody who doubts that we are not planning to do conservation in the future, we have gone to outdoor. We've always done outdoor, but we're even more focused on landscape. And that is where we're going to get some major reductions over the next 50 years. Technology is a big piece of that. I mentioned the guiding principle, which is technology. We're talking about, we've got irrigation controllers that are app-based. Everybody wants an app-based type of the system. We've got that in place now. We're piloting a project, and we really want to give people lots of more technology so that people are empowered to do their own conservation. People like to be engaged. That helps us out from a business perspective to make sure that we're conserving that water, but it really helps their customers in saving water. They don't have the maintenance of it, and their bills are lower, and that's ultimately the plus.
I don't remember the numbers, I don't know if you do, but I do know that we're a family of 4, and I have a relatively small yard, no sprinkler system. I have used those SAWS water saver coupons and converted both my front and back lawn to the type of landscape I should have. And we probably use about 2,500 gallons every month.
Yeah.
So, but a sprinkler system, when it's running on a regular basis, uses about how much water?
About 2,000 to 3,000 gallons, and so it's a big hit. It's a lot of water that you can do, and so we want to make sure that is being done in the most efficient way. Obviously, people want yards. Kids, we want to make sure they can go out and play, and they run in the backyard. We don't want them playing out in the streets, so go to the backyard, and so there's a lifestyle associated with being able to have a yard that you can play in. But absolutely, there are ways so that you're doing it in an efficient manner, but also having the kind of lifestyle that's needed.
Sure. Do we have another question?
There's one question about the timeline going forward and how people can continue to be
involved. We talked about that a
involved.
little earlier, but we'll repeat it because I know viewers come in and out.
Sure,
So tell us how this will
Timeline, it
function.
is on the streets now, like you mentioned. Is just come by and you can get a copy or go online, watercitysa.com. Lots of different mechanisms to see it. We're trying to get comments in by August 15th. We'll go to the city council in early August and talk to them to make sure we get that feedback. And we'll go to our board in September for approval of the water management plan.
Okay, perfect. I'm feeling like we've addressed the bulk of the questions. If we didn't get to one of your questions, or if you're watching it in a replay and you feel that there's another question or comment you'd like to submit, please do so. I really want to thank you for your time. I appreciate you, and it's a big chunk of time. I hope this was helpful for our viewers. Again, water management plan can be seen on watercitysa.com, and you can also submit comments via email at wmp-input@saws.org. And I'm sure that information is also in our comments. So thank you for joining us. Appreciate you guys being here. Bye-bye.